Let's talk politics then, shall we? Because it is more bad news today for the Tory party, because according to YouGov polling and other bits and pieces I've seen as well, apparently now it looks like the Tories could very soon slip behind Reform UK. Look, let's just get straight into this debate, Matt Goodwin. Your thoughts on this?
We are approaching a watershed moment in British politics. I mean, if Reform draw level with the Conservatives in the polling, if they even push ahead of the Conservatives in the polling, we're going to see something that we've really not seen before in this country. Yes, you might say the Brexit party polled well in the spring of 2019 amid all the Brexit chaos, but let me tell you, there's something more fundamental going on here. I think the Tories are rapidly facing an extinction level event. They've only got 4 weeks to turn this around. Nigel Farage is clearly enjoying a boost in the polling. He's taking about 35 to 40% of 2019 Conservatives. Rishi Sunak, most of the polling suggests, is having a bad campaign. So here's my question. What happens, Michelle, if Reform start pulling ahead of the Conservatives in the polls? I mean, what happens to all those MPs thinking about defecting? What happens to the donors who are thinking about giving Reform big money? What happens to all the voters out there in the country who say, hang on a minute, suddenly Reform looks like a credible alternative? Then actually, I think all bets are off. This election could get really exciting.
Stella?
I do think it could be a Canada 1993 situation. A lot of people have been talking about this. This is when the Canadian Conservative Party completely got eviscerated and the Liberals in Canada got a massive majority. There are some things that have changed from last year. We now know that there are a lot more young people, there are a lot more Zoomers who are more authoritative than they used to be.
Tell people what a Zoomer is.
A Zoomer. So I'm a millennial, I'm 29, and I'm a young millennial. Anyone younger than me who is an adult is a Zoomer. That's the generation of Zoomers.
Right.
So it's the younger generation, the new blood. And people always think that young people are left-wing. When you are young, you're a liberal. If you are younger and you're not a left-wing, then you don't have a heart. If you're older and you're not a conservative, then you don't have a brain. But this is not actually the case. This didn't always used to be the case, in the UK especially. So now we are seeing that the young vote has completely collapsed for the Conservatives. And that's because they have completely disappointed them on very important issues for them, such as housing, for example. Nobody can get on the housing ladder. And so Reform has a very, very good chance of overtaking them and becoming the second party.
Can I just briefly on that, because I completely agree. And speaking as what's classified as a geriatric millennial, born in 1981, I think what's really interesting here is there's a kind of Tory elite class, people who are writing about Reform, who don't quite get Reform. So what they're saying is, well, Nigel Farage is terrible, a vote for Reform is a vote for Labour. And what they're not reflecting on is what the Conservative Party has done to the country over the last 14 years, including those Gen Z Zoomers. Because I keep meeting young people in Westminster who are saying, hang on a minute, why would I vote Conservative? They gave us mass immigration on steroids. They made the housing crisis worse. They didn't really level up the country. They certainly didn't control the borders. They've not given me a stake in this system on any meaningful level. And to make it worse, they've kind of laughed at everybody who's voting for Farage like they laughed for everybody who was voting for Brexit. So I actually think the sort of Tory elite class here is really out of touch with who's voting for them. And that's going to be really problematic for Rishi Sunak and the party. Well, they can't. It's too late. It's too late. The Tories are finished at this election. It's over. They're averaging 24% of the vote, Michelle.
I could tell you, any Tory that would be sitting on this panel right now, they would be pushing back very hard. I had Bill Cash out on here, actually. When was that? Monday? You tell me at home. I think it was Monday. He was on here. He was absolutely resolute that the Tories will, continue. They will prevail. Don't believe it is as bad as what you're saying.
They might continue, but they're not going to win this election. Labour's going to win the biggest majority, I think, probably since 1997. And the reality of that is, they're going to win that, not because people are falling in love with the Labour Party, but because people really dislike the Tories.
Well, what about George Galloway's Workers' Party then? Because there's a lot of people... Well, there's a lot of people, actually, that would sit there and say that Labour's got a problem when it comes to the Israel-Gaza situation. People like George Galloway are very vocal about that. They would say that they are the party that truly, represent the working class, especially for those people that are very concerned about the situation in Gaza.
Where has George Galloway been in the last few days? I haven't seen him around. The thing is, George Galloway is a completely fringe politician. He has even less support than the Green Party. He is nowhere to be seen, and I do not think that he has a bigger base other than disgruntled minority voters who he panders to and he tries to pretend that he's on their side.
But look, just briefly on that, Galloway's not the only problem facing Labour. I agree he's a minor problem. There's another dynamic to this. I think reform are actually going to be a problem for Labour. And I think, here's a prediction, the morning after the general election, I think we'll wake up and we'll all be seeing just how many second places reform have in Labour seats. A little bit like 2015, when Nigel Farage and UKIP had 120 second place finishes. If Farage actually gets this right, he'll be able to say the day after the election, not only am I in Clacton, and not only maybe is Richard Tice elected in Boston and Skegness, let's see, but reform is now second in 100, 150 seats across the Red Wall in parts of Wales. And this is where it gets interesting, not 2024, but 28, 29, when actually you start to see Labour facing serious opposition from reform, not the Tories.
Yes, highly unlikely that in this election reform will be able to make a dent on the Labour Party, because prior to the new reform leadership, there were only 7 constituencies across all polling where reform was polling second, and as a result likely to get a parliamentary seat. And obviously, then organising their field games, their data is not yet there for them to be able to get out the vote. But when you look online, you can see that very clearly. Reform's game plan is not to have the best constituency organising in the same traditional way that the Labour Party does, for example. They are looking at social media. They are looking to make this a cultural issue, and they are looking to inspire people with all of these new types of social media, like TikTok videos that make it look cool. But the issue is that they are not going to tackle the actual problems, and that is my worry about the Labour Party, that we will be distracted by the one issue, single issue that the Reform Party has, which is immigration, and this is not the biggest issue for our problems in this country. So this is what I'm afraid.
Is that not it's not a real issue?
No, it is not immigration. Immigration is not our biggest issue.
Well, we're going to be talking about that issue after the break. Let me just clarify something, because a few people are getting in touch saying that you celebrated, apparently, the assault on Nigel
I did, and people don't know what get the bag means. So I posted a tweet after the Sun editor, Harry Cole, exposed this young woman for being an OnlyFans girl, for having an OnlyFans account. And there were all of these people gleefully shaming her for having an OnlyFans account. And can I just say, young girls, if you're watching this, I do not think you should have an OnlyFans account. I don't think it's a good idea. I definitely do not condone you assaulting politicians, throwing milkshakes on people.
Good.
But get the bag means basically, girl, get the money, because you know what's going to have so many OnlyFans subscribers now that Harry Cole tweeted that. So that was it. It was a joke. Don't be so sensitive, right-wing people. It's okay if you want to make jokes about us left-wing women, when you have to take it the other way as well.
What a life to aspire to as a young woman, selling pictures of your bits for a couple of quid. Ugh, it's not for me, I can tell you. Anyway, look, I do just have to tell you, read out a candidate list as well, because we have just been mentioning Clacton. Of course, you've got Jiravan Owosu Nepal from Labour, Giles Watling from Conservative, Matthew Bennislam from Lib Dems, Nigel Farage from Reform, Natasha Osben from the Green Party.